Hello, welcome to Ruth section 3 of our 6 sections of the book of Ruth. I recently attended a silver wedding celebration. It was a lovely occasion with good company, pleasant surroundings, and great food. But the most memorable moment was a short speech by the husband, who commented that he and his wife were grateful for many good times and hoped that the difficult times had made them better, not bitter people. I immediately thought of Ruth, the young woman whose character and faith seemed to have been refined in her difficult times. As women with no husband, father-in-law, brother-in-law, or son, Ruth and Orpah faced with Naomi an uncertain and insecure future. Naomi's words to her daughters-in-law suggest that their best chance was to forget the unfortunate family they had married into and begin afresh in their homeland with new husbands to provide and look after them. But notice that Orpah's love for Naomi is not questioned. She makes a difficult decision and accepts Naomi's advice. Ruth's relationship with Naomi is different, and it leads her to make a different decision. And we notice that as Orpah leaves Naomi, Ruth clings to Naomi. It's an interesting word which the Bible uses for cling, as it really means a relationship which is binding, all-encompassing and inclusive. And this is what it says in verse 14. At this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, and Ruth clung to her. Unfortunately, some may blame Orpah for what they see as disbanding Naomi, but really we should see it as submissive obedience. Orpah was dissuaded from going with Naomi by the sensible counsel of the older women, and she returned to Moab. Maybe Orpah returned to Moab because she believed her God, Chemosh, was superior to Yahweh. We're not told the reason. We simply know that she made a different decision to Ruth. We could examine it in today's terms and say that some people are like Ruth, and they will become believers in Yahweh, while others, with the best of intentions, will not. It's a decision we all should make, whether to worship God or go another way and worship other idols. Ruth also makes clear that her decision is not just for the moment, but is for life. In verse 17 we read, "Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." So her pledge to Naomi is really serious, and we should see it as being really serious. Verses 16 and 17 bring us to the climax of the chapter. And here we have, "But Ruth replied, 'Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God.'" The desperation of the earlier verses is balanced by the hope which this level of devotion always allows. It is devotion that justifies Ruth's choice to abandon good sense. She abandons her people and her God, Chemosh. The Bible doesn't ignore the fact that other people worship other gods. But the distinction is the Bible never takes seriously the existence of other gods apart from Yahweh. Various other gods are mentioned in the Bible, but they are objects of worship, as for example, a person may worship a tree. Ruth's heart rules her head, but we don't critique her for it. Her own tragedy has established a faith and a loyalty, which are motivated by love and conviction. She keeps faith with Naomi, and this in turn reflects her deep faith in God. In her difficult times, Ruth has become not bitter, but better, a bit like the couple where I started. And this legitimizes her advice into centre stage as this chapter concludes and the story progresses. So we've discovered that Ruth is prepared to live in a foreign land, and this legitimizes her advice into centre stage as this chapter concludes and the story progresses. So we've discovered that Ruth is prepared to live in a foreign land away from her natural family. How would you feel if you thought God was calling you to do the same? Finally, I'd like to say a little word about kindness. We'll find this word is used a lot throughout this book. It's only a little word, but it means such a lot. This is the English word which is translated from the word hesed. Within the Old Testament, it describes the nature of God's relationship to Israel. It means committed, loyal love. It is a deliberate, lasting, and consistent relationship that does not depend on circumstances or merit. In this book of Ruth, Ruth's kindness is commended, and God's kindness is acknowledged. In this way, Ruth reflects God's own character and purpose. She exemplifies the loyalty God looks for in his people, even though she is a Moabite. So Ruth has a role to play in God's unfolding purposes for Israel as her story progresses. We're not told anything about the return journey to Bethlehem, which incidentally means breadbasket. So it must have been built on a fertile area which provided enough food for the people. But Ruth and Naomi do return there, and the townspeople recognize Naomi. But Naomi complains about what she sees as God's doing to her life. And we get that in verses 19 to 21. And we have, so the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman explained, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." And it is verse 22 that tells us they arrived back in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. And this is what it says. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. So it was the beginning of the barley harvest. And I think that lasted 2 months, which was followed by the wheat harvest. So it was quite a long time that Ruth had to be involved in the fields, etc. So next time in section 4 and beyond, we'll consider how God uses Ruth to provide a great king, well, 2 great kings actually for Israel. And as we get towards the end of this little book, we'll discover that Ruth is none other than a direct ancestor of yet another great king. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again in section 4.